Greetings! Are you watching the amount of stunts that's unfolding in Guyana? Why were our elections paused? Is someone trying to rig? And if so, who? In this video, we will take a quick look at some of the facts. Stay tuned! Before we get into it, if you're new here, please give this video a like and subscribe to this channel for more updates on what's going on in Guyana. Now let's start from the beginning. And I need to point out that I don't take pay from nobody. My mission is the truth, and some will find it hard to accept what I have to say because they're exposed to propaganda. Nevertheless, here's the truth. A no-confidence motion brought the government of Guyana down in December of 2018. Litigation delayed the consequences of that motion, which was passed and eventually validated by the Caribbean Court of Justice, giving the government up to September 2019 to hold fresh elections. Mr. Granger, in defiance of the Constitution, used GCOM to delay the holding of elections and eventually announced March 2, 2020 as the day for fresh elections, after pressure from the international community, who labeled this government unconstitutional and paused funding for development projects until after elections. Type true or false in the comments and explain if you have a different account of what happened. Now, both major political parties went into the elections with great confidence. There were massive crowds gathered at the APNU-AFC rally, and likewise the PPP. The APNU ran a campaign that was mostly about trash-talking the PPP, namely the 19 fraud charges pending against Mr. Ali, who's the presidential candidate for the PPP, and questioned his literal fitness to run Guyana. Their main campaign theme were honesty and decency, and forward ever, backwards never. The opposition, on the other hand, was mostly defending accusations made by the APNU and trying to put their message out there about how they will develop Guyana, and hosted a bunch of press conferences alleging corruption by the incumbent and criticizing their mishandling of the oil contracts. Their main campaign theme was Stronger Together for a Better Guyana. Good. So elections day came and had a large turnout. People were seen fetching the elderly up the stairs at polling places, and it was a peaceful day. After about 8:30 p.m. on E-Day, people started sending in photos of statements of polls that were posted at the polling places. Stabroek News was able to collect quite a few of these statements and started aggregating the numbers on their site. We used those numbers to make a chart, and this is how we were tracking the unofficial results. Eventually, the returning officers for various regions started to make their declarations, and we switched to this chart using numbers from the results declared by the ROs. We got declarations for all the regions except Region 4, and we're still stuck at this point. Region 4 is now the subject of a court matter, and before we get into the court, let's zoom into when the problem started at Region 4's returning office. Region 4's returning officer fell ill and had to be rushed to the hospital. In fact, don't let me tell you what happened. Take a look at this series of videos that will paint a very clear picture of what transpired.
The returning officer for Region 4, Mr. Claremont Mingo, is being rushed to the hospital from the GCOM Media Center at Hatfield and High Street, Georgetown. Mr. Mingo apparently has been sick since this morning. When the count for Region 4 was supposed to be continued at 9 a.m., it has now been delayed.
Why don't you come around if you have some computer expertise?
It's that one there. No.
Go back to the screen you just left. This is one.
One entry, there it is.
Let's go to the bottom of this.
Scroll down.
That's the entire Georgia
Go right down.
population.
How can it be tabulated?
They already have the results.
Yeah.
Results not done
What is the specific issue with the counting of the Region 4 SOPs?
Well, we don't know what the specific issue is with the Region 4 SOPs, but what we do know is that there is a spreadsheet that was produced and there are discrepancies between the numbers that are on those spreadsheets.
Tell us about those discrepancies.
Well, I don't have specific numbers, but there are certain, like I said, numbers were higher and lower in some cases, and that is all I will comment
Higher or
on.
lower
Who
for
is the
your
legend that
party?
you-
I will not comment on that part. That is for GCOM
Tell me
to
something.
present
Did
that.
party agent collectively object to the spreadsheet?
I know I will not speak on behalf of the APNUFC nor the PPPC, but I will tell you that the New Movement, TCI, and the Liberty and Justice Party have requested the SOPs.
Can you ascertain whether Mr. Mingo, the returning officer, has resumed duty since he was?
As far as I know, I have not seen him in there, so it is yet to be seen as
Who
his
is
position.
actually
The CEO came in, obviously made he went through a random check as to what the spreadsheets would say, and I think those were the positions where the discrepancies came up, and then we've just decided let's get to the SOPs.
Have you been told why they've cancelled the verification process?
It is not cancelled. As far as we know, is that GCOM, the commissioners and so on, are still meeting, and when they've concluded that meeting, then we're going to find obviously a way forward.
Do you know who's working in the absence of Mr. Mingo? Who's taking his duties?
I just got here maybe about an hour ago. I've just been engaged in discussions with our team in there. So at this point, I cannot answer that question.
How confident are you that the election process so far has been free and fair?
Well, I think nationally we have seen some fantastic performance in terms of what GCOM would have done and what the agents would have done. It is now, but the process is not concluded yet. We're hopeful that what comes out of tonight, once again, is integrity. And I've said this multiple times. I'd rather have results that have the integrity, and I will sacrifice expedience for integrity any day. Because if we don't get that, what is going to happen is that we'll end up in courts for a long drawn-out process, which would not satisfy the country. I'm sure it would not satisfy the political parties.
As you're aware, last night they started the verification of the statements of poll for Region 4. So they had gone through quite a few, and then at about 2 a.m., unexpectedly they stopped. They said they would resume this morning. Now the process that was used was the RO would call out the statements of poll, their numbers, and then all the parties will decide whether they had a variance, and they accepted that. So they did not restart this morning. Then we heard Mr. Mingo fell ill, and then at 1 p.m. they resumed this with a spreadsheet from somewhere. We don't know who prepared this spreadsheet. Now the law says, and what's done in all the regions, that you have to use statements of poll in the verification. They came with a spreadsheet and started to call out missed boxes from the spreadsheet. In 23 places that they called out, in 17 of those, they had happened with at least 100 votes more than that are on the statement of poll. So everyone objected. The observers, the political parties, everyone objected.
All of the timeline, everything hangs on the timeline. Has this been impressed with the commission?
Well, I think everybody knows. Everybody wants a decision as quickly and as soon as possible. But the important thing, as I said yesterday, was they need to have accurate and credible results. And so going to the SOPs and doing that is the way forward.
It announced that they are going to revert to what is the legal process. So they're going to go back and start it over using statement to poll by statement to poll, which is a good thing. You know, these elections were exceptionally wonderful. When the GCOM staff was well trained, the elections were fair in the voting process. It was professional. It was credible, and for this to happen after all of that good work by GCOM was very sad. So when I came here today and saw this,
Any input on what transpired here, Mr. Jonas?
I could not believe that a process that was so well professionally done and organized that would end up like this. But the good thing is they're starting it over, and hopefully by tomorrow they should be finished.
Okay, how far along are they? Are they
They're
starting from the starting again?
I am not sure exactly where they're starting from, because remember initially they were doing it right, and then when it stopped, so from wherever they stopped doing it right, they would start back from there. And my only concern was that this process is not a complicated process. And if the delay was happening because people were being meticulous and being careful to be accurate, I would say yes. But the fact that they were stopping for hours and long hours and nothing was going on, as a citizen of Guyana, election results are a very serious thing for us. The entire city is under tension, closed down, and every citizen is waiting. And people should not be sleeping, but we should be working through the night. From the time this thing starts and stops, it should never stop.
How can you not be concerned? This is a list produced by GCOM, presented to everybody, that is demonstrably mistaken, has mistakes. How can you not be concerned? Where did it come from? How can people sign off on this, produce it, present it to the public? What is worse is that the two parties have both, before a statement from GCOM and before this count, announced to their supporters that they've won. So you have out there, as you can see, a growing crowd of angry people who believe the decent, honest people of integrity that lead them, and in this case have misled them into thinking that they've won. They genuinely believe their leaders that they've won, and they're out there thinking, what's going on now? Why the delay? If we've won, why are we here?
Yes. I think you should stop.
Yes, so
There's a different avenue to exit.
Yes.
I suggest that
Yes.
take that.
So I just pass it on to
Okay.
you know what you're doing and just in case. And I thank you very much. No, I wouldn't do that. I just no, I'm just quoting. No, I know. I just want to say something what I heard. I should have said this in my ears.
No, but it comes across as intimidation, that you're trying to intimidate the observers when you speak about taking away accreditation.
All right, so I'm just happy that you're here and you're on some place that's been in good spirits. I'm happy to see you. Some of you are seeing for the first time. And just keep on doing your work. So the last word you're hearing from me is to continue doing your good job.
No, but then it doesn't take away from the fact that you made a threat that you were told to take away accreditation.
No, I'm telling you. Are you listening to me? I'm saying, I told you I wasn't in agreement with that. So please listen to me. I said I wasn't in agreement with it. Just give me an honest space. Listen to me. I said I wasn't in agreement of that.
But then,
I was not in agreement.
why was that proper?
But maybe I should take it back. Maybe I should take it back. Maybe I should take it back. I should take it back.
I speak on behalf of the Commonwealth, the largest concentration of people in the world.
Yes.
And I am not going to have nothing the Commonwealth is respected by a threat to take away the medication of the Commonwealth. I will speak to the Commonwealth. I'm going for it. I'm going to speak to the Commonwealth Secretary General shortly. She's willing to speak to me. And I have a duty to her to report accurately. And if you cannot know, avoid speaking accurately.
Absolutely. I agree.
So that if you avoid this, because I'm saying this, no.
Hello.
Take it away, but give it back. Because good people have never done this yet. And I will not take it.
All right, thank you. I'm coming out. Thank you.
Right, APNU and AFC have come to tell you thanks. We worked hard. We covered all of the regions. We laid out our plans. You know what we stand for, and you supported us. Over the next 5 years, we are going to make life better for you.
So there are opportunities for the election to have credibility, but both sides, all sides, everyone in this country, whether you think you've won, which I think both sides have claimed that they think they've won, if that's true, then what they want is to win in a credible, transparent way. And so we urge GCOM and we urge the political parties and the people of Guyana to come together and pay close attention to how these results are going to be verified in a transparent way. And thus far, we have not seen that transparency. And so with respect only to the District 4 results, those results in our view lack credibility.
All that we've been calling for is free and fair elections. But this was clearly not the case today. At the beginning, we were pleased with the polling stations, but after the returning officer fell sick and we saw what started to happen, we realized that things were in play to put aside free and fair elections.
Chief Justice Roxanne George will rule Wednesday in the case filed by private citizen Riaz Hollander, backed by attorneys from the opposition PPP, that the Region 4 returning officer breached the country's electoral law when he Thursday last declared the unverified vote count for the largest voting district, 4. She will give her ruling Wednesday. The process of verification is referred to in the law as counting of the votes polled, and is provided for by Section 84(1) of the Representation of the People Act, Chapter 103. Region 4 had 897 polling stations, but the returning officer only allowed others to be present for the tabulation of 421 statements of poll and aborted the process after. He then certified the votes counted and handed it to the country's chief elections officer, who went ahead and prepared a final report of all 10 electoral districts for the Guyana Elections Commission GECOM to declare a winner. 6 affidavits were presented in the case, namely from John Adams and Aubrey Norton, candidates for APNU plus AFC, the returning officer Claremont Mingo, the deputy chief elections officer Roxanne Myers, and attorneys at law James Bond and Nicola Trotman. Senior counsel Neil Boston, the attorney for the chief elections officer, and the returning officer Mr. Claremont Mingo argued that Mr. Mingo had complied substantially with what the law says.
Substantial compliance will make it not invalid. And the substantial compliance, the Chief Justice seemed to mischaracterize in this thing. Substantial compliance does not have to do with the number of ballot boxes or the number of statement of poll that left to have been checked. It has to do with conduct. And that is what Mr. Mingo did. You may have 558 ballot boxes to come, and they might only be able to bring 20% of the votes. They might only be able to bring 20% of the votes. And those that went before, because of the area that they came from, could have given you but 70% of the votes. And you're going to say, that may not. How can she measure? It is only the issue of conduct has to do with substantial compliance rather than the issue of ballot boxes or statement of polls still to be come.
According to senior counsel Douglas Mendes, the attorney representing the applicant, the affidavit of the deputy chief elections officer Roxanne Myers and others all agreed that the process described in law was suspended sometime on the evening of Wednesday, March 4th, and it was to resume the following day, contradicting what Mr. Mingo stated in his evidence to the court. Mr. Mendes added that neither of the witnesses disputed that only 421 of the statements of poll had been verified or ascertained in the presence of party agents and that the other statements of poll were not examined in the same way. Mr. Anil Nandlal, one of the attorneys for the applicant, spoke with reporters afterwards.
And Mingo corroborated what we said, that he didn't complete the exercise. Mingo introduced a staff member as informing him that the exercise was completed. This staff member, as we were able to establish to the court, was not an authorized staff member, first thing, to be conducting the exercise. But secondly, we had case law authorities to show that the returning officer is the one who is tasked with the responsibility by Parliament, and only him personally can discharge it. And though he said he discharged it through his agency, his agents, he admitted implicitly that he didn't discharge it. He didn't complete it himself. And the affidavit of Bond and, who was the other one? Bond and Myers and Nicola Trotman, both accepted and admitted in their affidavit, either intentionally or unintentionally, that the process was not completed. That forced Boston to argue the issue of substantial non-compliance, and his arguments were disastrous, honestly.
The attorney for the applicant argued that if the legal process is not followed, it could lead to mistrust, suspicion, and lack of confidence in results declared, and so there should be no reason why the court should not order to set aside the declaration of the returning officer and start the process all over again. The Chief Justice said that there doesn't seem to have been any uniform methodology in all regions as to how 84-1 was to be applied or how the vote count should be verified. When the vote count for 9 regions had been verified and declared, the opposition PPP had won 6 of the 9 regions and was 52,000 votes ahead. But with the unverified report of Region 4, the APNU plus AFC coalition was put in the lead and on course to win the elections. The PPP said the figures were doctored. Meanwhile, as this story continues to develop, CARICOM Chairman and Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, will be leading a delegation of regional leaders to Guyana on Wednesday. Mottley made the announcement Tuesday afternoon during a national address from the Hilton, Barbados.
So, this video is being published before the Chief Justice's ruling on the matter. We will continue to track the developments and keep you updated. Before I go though, I want to shout out Mr. Lennox Truman, who showed up at the court with buns out to make a statement. We hear you loud and clear, my friend. I also want to give Triple B's Enterprise a big up. They have this amazing vehicle tracking service, and one of my favorite features is the engine shut off. If someone hijacks your car, you can shut the engine off with a freaking app. Check out their Facebook page or contact them on 682-8326 for more information. Boom out!